Skadoosh.
That was amazing.
Hi, I'm Macy.
I'm Olivia.
I'm Mason.
So today we're going to be looking at the presence of white privilege within society and on social media platforms of Instagram.
First, we'll take a look at the results of some questions and polls we made for our own individual Instagram pages. And we're going to see what our observers' opinions are on the subject matter.
Then we'll take it to the streets where we see what some of the general public thinks. Some of the locations we'll be heading to are UNB and Stu Campus, RC, the Indigenous Center, and downtown.
Before we go, smash that like button and subscribe and look out for the name drops below.
Let's do this. Hi there. So we're heading into RC to check out what the answers and results were for some of the polls and questions we placed up on our Instagram pages about white privilege and what people think about it. Wait, what even is white privilege?
Wait, you don't even know what white privilege is? Let me tell you. Macy, Olivia, and I have constructed our own definition of what white privilege is based off some of the readings we've done, such as Your Privilege is Trending, Confronting Whiteness on Social Media, written by Teresa L. Petray and Rowan Collin, and a learner's guide made by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. White institutional power and racial prejudice causes a spillover effect that is white privilege. Simply because one is white, they have privilege. White people have greater availability to resources based off their skin color. The norm is seen as the white ways of thinking and living, and this norm is to what light all people of color are compared. White people have the ability to grow up thinking race does not matter. That is a privilege. Those who hold white privilege do not face daily obstacles due to the color of their skin. And ladies and gentlemen, that is what white privilege is.
As a part of our vlog, we decided to post a poll on each of our Instagrams, and the first question being, who is your favorite Instagram influencer? And some of the results we got that we looked over and reflected on, we saw a lot of white representation in our answers. When we asked if yes, how, after we put up the question, we kind of reflected on why the structure of the sentence was like that, and someone else from RC also mentioned it too. So I guess it kind of points out our way of thinking, because we said if yes, so we assumed that yes, that people were going to be like, yes, there's white privilege present on Instagram, but what does that mean for us? Like, why do we automatically assume that people are going to say yes? Because there was a big portion that said that there was no white privilege present on Instagram. So from what I think, maybe it might be because of where we're at, maybe like for school and background education, we're in an institution that talks about white privilege where a lot of places don't. So I guess we might have more knowledge and we might be more hopeful that people think that white privilege is present. From one of the answers that we got from our if yes how, we got the use of cultural appropriation. But when I read this answer, I thought about an article that I read about white privilege, and the author is Thomas DeFrantz. Something that he points out is that white privilege is doing anything just because you can. When you see those photos of people at like music festivals or wearing headdresses, they do it just because they can. They don't have somebody to answer to. Like, they don't know, they don't need to be told if it's right or wrong. So something that he says is white privilege is doing it just because, without a group to answer to or create among. Not really. When everyone is out for their individual white selves, the privilege is the assumption that it is okay.
So a common answer for our question, if yes, how, was that it is the default standard for most things, beauty, makeup, fashion. Specifically speaking about white privilege, within beauty and makeup and fashion, you see normally marketing and products centered around white being the default, where makeup had, up until recently, had such a limited range for their supply. We only saw porcelain, ivory, tan, and dark as your basic makeup colors for people to choose from for their foundation, their concealer, their bronzer. And makeup, beauty, and fashion have always been produced for the white customer. They've always been produced for a white audience, for a white society. You didn't really see a lot of inclusion. So what are we looking at here?
So we're looking at Kylie Jenner's Instagram page. We were inspired by Stuart Hall. We want to dissect her page and maybe a photo to see what kind of power and privilege is beneath it. So I think this one might be a good one because you can see she's wearing like a Chanel sweater, Chanel glasses,
A Prada purse.
What kind of car is behind her? I'm not sure. It looks pretty expensive. Her hair is nice and sleek. Her makeup looks nice.
Photo may be photoshopped. She seems to be playing to an audience that expects this luxury. They expect things they don't have because she's a celebrity and she has money. She influences people. She has this beauty about her. She's fitting the ideal image of beauty with her curves and her style and her makeup, portraying something that she knows her audience is desiring.
And it makes me think of Foucault's theory and practice of subjectivity when they talk about this mask that people try to conform to, because you can see it on her Instagram where, like Olivia said, she's like strategically posting these things that she knows her fans are gonna like. Like she knows her fans are gonna like pictures of her baby, and like she needs those likes because that's where the money rolls in. So she's conforming to this mask that she knows people are gonna like just so she can fit into this society. Where are we going?
We're going to interview Nadia Wiseout, the Indigenous Student Representative at Marshall Davery Hall Indigenous Center. Come on. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We're just wondering if we could do some interview questions with you.
Yeah, for sure. I really like Sarah's day because what she does, like she promotes really like a holistic lifestyle and like how she lives and everything, and also because she also does promote like a paleo diet, and so that also kind of aligns with our traditional ways of eating, I guess, because it's really a lot of eating things from the land rather than processed foods and everything like that, and so that's really why I like her, because that's something that I'm trying to do. Yes, a lot of people who try to like advocate for like on issues that don't typically involve like white people, I guess. And so like what happens when they try to advocate for this is like being locked out of their accounts. They're not able to like advocate and like do those things. Another thing I also noticed is that issues not typically revolved around white people don't get a lot of the outrage that a lot of those issues do get. I feel that representation is so important, and good representation at that, because these are the people that we look up to, and these are the people that we're gonna become that when we're older. So having good representation for us, it motivates us to continue doing the work and continue going to school and continue to do like the other things that we do. It doesn't even have to be like in like studying at university. Even it could even be like seeing that representation of people like participating in ceremony and all the different things that we do, and seeing people advocate for us as Indigenous people, advocate about our issues, and seeing them like say all of these things on a platform that it continuously tries to exclude us. And so I believe having that good representation is good for all of us, because it motivates us to continue doing these things and to continue changing the world from having like that white privilege being a representation so common on like social media and like everywhere else in society. Because we don't see our issues like portrayed on social media a lot, and so when we do, it's a lot of outrage from us because we are angry, and like we're angry about these things because our issues aren't being represented very well. And so when non-Indigenous people see us advocating for our issues on social media, they see that outrage, and we're outraged because we don't commonly get that representation and everything like that. So it creates this stigma towards Indigenous people that like we're angry, and like we are. are, because we don't have that good representation, and it further creates that stigma. A lot of non-Indigenous people don't really see a lot of the things that we're like angry about and that we're sharing. Another thing that I noticed is that these social media things, they have algorithms that flesh out all of those things, and so if you're not sharing things about indigenous issues or other issues not related to what's like in the media at the moment, it's going to be flushed out from your timeline. One thing I really notice is when Indigenous people advocate for the Inuit who hunt seal, and I noticed that on a lot of posts when they're advocating for the Inuit, they are blocked from their accounts, and they're no longer able to like voice their like opinions on things. The people who are who are against like the Inuit doing their seal hunting, like they're not like getting blocked from their things. Like you can see on the scale like who's important and who's not, like on these social media outlets. It's a very common thing when it comes to like issues not particularly like that are shown on the news and like things like that. The people that own these social media outlets, that they're like constantly fleshing out our voice, and I think that's very damaging.
So where are we going?
We're gonna go see Lucas. He is a student at UNB and see what his thoughts are on white privilege. Hi.
Hello. David Dobrik. David is very innovative. He's very generous. He gives away a lot of items. He doesn't spend a lot of his money on himself. He has like nice cars and stuff, but he doesn't tend to show that off in a lot of what he portrays on social media. He likes to give away those items and show other people with those items, and shows like how generous and kind that he is, and that other people can kind of be like him and do stuff that he does. I'm gonna say, yes, it is. I don't see a lot of that in my social media because I tend to filter out the stuff that I like and don't like, the stuff I want to see or what I like wish not to see. But I believe that it is on social media, and Instagram in particular. But what's so great and not so great about the internet is that you're able to express your feelings and opinions however you feel. And unfortunately, there are people who spread lies or rumors or whatever it is on Instagram or social media or whatever, and they're able to get their opinions out to the world in a much easier way than they used to in the past. Representation matters because everyone has their own feelings and opinions, and it's important to respect everyone online and to appreciate and accept everyone's different cultures and races, because that's the right thing to do.
We're downtown on the streets in Branscombe, and we're gonna ask some people what they think about white privilege.
Do you see white privilege present on social media or media in general?
Oh, of course.
And how so?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the pockets of social media that you occupy. I think some people can get into a bubble where they find a lot of representation, and because that's what they're seeking out in their life. But I think for the majority of people in this present climate don't seek that out, or seek their own bubble, right? Like there's completely that bias. You tend to trust things that look like you and people that look like you. So being a white girl with blonde hair, like I see a lot less visible minorities in my content. But at the same time, I'm not on social media a ton.
How does the presence or lack of representation in social media or media in general impact oppression and stereotypes?
Oh, it just reinforces that bubble. If you don't believe there's a problem that exists, it's probably because it's not a problem in your own life. And if you don't force yourself to get outside that bubble, you're not going to see that problem from another perspective, and it just keeps the cycle going, right?
What I've experienced with most growing up in a predominantly white community while still being a biracial individual, there's been this new idea put out within Black culture called light skin privilege, where light skins are, biracial people are looked at as more of an exotic and beautiful version of Black people. Numerous times growing up, I've been praised for the color of my skin, the look of it, because many people see it as something very unique, not normal. But the backlash that I receive most from it is from the Black community, because then in certain discussions I'm told I cannot identify myself as Black, or I'm not Black enough. And then from white side of culture, I'm not white enough. I kind of have never had a safe space for me to talk about my experiences. I've never belonged in either or. I think it's really hard because the way that the fashion industry presents mixed and biracial individuals is they do try to demonstrate just a very unique, it's beautiful, it's exotic, you don't come across it often, and they really do neglect dark women. They neglect dark men because they don't see Black as beautiful. I think the perfect example is photoshopping. If we just didn't have Photoshop, that would make life so much easier for the beauty industry, because it would not have these societal standards just kind of forced upon women, and especially the fact that there are more Black women being presented within the beauty industry, especially women like Rihanna, who come out with a beauty line that is made for all women of all skin types. I think the issues really are rooted around photo editing, because at the end of the day, majority of the time, you're just not good enough, no matter who you are. I was really fortunate to be taking a gender and women's studies class this year, because we talk about how society's just all focused around a very heteronormative white men, women, marriage society, and there's no intersectionality. And what intersectionality is when just certain parts of people's identities and the complexities intersect.
My experience with white privilege is, I guess, kind of unique. As background, I'm half white and half Japanese, but I'm more white passing, especially when people don't know. They just assume. I guess my experience with white privilege is that because I'm white passing, I haven't experienced a lot of the same kinds of discrimination as other people. But I do experience white privilege, especially more systemically online, even when you're like signing up for a social media website. There's all these like demographic questions. The language around it's problematic and could be changed so that it doesn't other people. And they'll ask like, what's your race? And they'll usually put like white, Asian, Hispanic, Black, and then other. Just the word other that's placed there instead of like mixed race or like prefer not to answer. Words that could be used in replacement. They put other and it just feels very weird. I never really thought about it, but just I guess over time, like subconsciously, when you keep reading other, and all the options that you have to fill out, it becomes ingrained in you that you are the other. I definitely have purposefully displayed my racial identity. I think just a couple weeks ago, I posted a bunch of pictures of me in like a kimono. But I want to share, like, I'm proud of being Japanese and I'm proud of my culture. I definitely purposely put it out there almost to prove it to myself that it is part of my identity. I've done that in the past. I never really thought about it, but in the past I've done things like put it in my bio about like either some like flags or saying that I'm like Eurasian in my bio, which is, I guess, it's a very purposeful display of race. I think it's just to kind of show to myself, but I guess in a sense that I was doing it also to convenience others, just to prove that I am who I am. Sometimes makes me nervous when I kind of post those things. I feel that I have a reach to people. Of course, I'm not saying like I'm an influencer. I mean, I definitely have an influence on people, and I feel nervous about posting because I don't want to be like the representative for being Japanese. I feel like through my life I've had like imposter syndrome where I feel like I'm not fully part of like Japanese culture. It's a weird feeling, I guess. Part of that makes it me really like self-conscious when I post kind of cultural things onto Instagram, because I don't want to represent everybody. I feel that for some people I might be the only representation of Japanese
people that they see on their feed, I always am very careful with what I post because I almost like don't want to do my heritage wrong.
The lack of representation in the public eye is a big one because in Canada, a lot of people didn't know what residential schools were until just recently in the past couple years. And just a lack of representation as well as knowledge on issues that concern Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, and it makes you understand why certain communities and certain, people are the way that they are. It's because they've been dealing with white privilege and, lack of representation and racism ever since first contact. I think it's important to have representation because these people that are going through their lives every single day, Indigenous people in their communities, Black people in the street, Latinos, and everybody else in between, they need representation because even though they're considered a minority, they should be considered the majority because they've struggled for so long.
I feel like my experience with white privilege would be the deep systemic colonial values and things that I kind of had to question about myself. Throughout my life, it was kind of like I had to question a lot, just the idea of my beauty or my standards or anything based off of just colonial and white values, and just how I would never truly fit into that category. And I was trying to very censor myself and try to be be tokenized to be accepted. And I feel like that played a big part into white privilege because it deeply embedded into who I was, and it made me question a lot more than just my identity, but things I wanted to do with my life.
My experience with white privilege is acknowledging that I myself have white privilege because of my skin color, because I am a white passing Indigenous person. When I reflect on my experience with white privilege, I resonate a lot with a TED Talk given by a Dalhousie University student. Her name is Mercedes Peters. Her TED Talk segment was called Lessons in White Privilege from a Light-Skinned Ilnu. Some of the points she brought up I really connected with. So one of them was being, because of the color of my skin, I have the privilege to be able to decide if I want people to know if I'm Indigenous. And I didn't know how much of a privilege this was until I really thought about it, I guess, because a lot of my friends and family don't have that choice. They don't have the choice to decide if they want people to know if they're Indigenous. If I don't want people to know my background, I don't have to tell them. They won't know. I mean, unless they really look, but I have that privilege of being able to decide if I want people to know if I'm Indigenous or not. And what comes with that is that I don't have to face racial prejudice when it comes to the color of my skin. So if I go outside, I don't have that fear of people discriminating me because of the color of my skin. And that's a really big privilege. I don't have that fear. I have friends and family who continuously go through these experiences where they're discriminated because of the color of their skin. And also another one that I thought was a pretty valid point was that my voice is sometimes deemed more valuable because of the color of my skin. And it hurts me to think that a lot of my friends and family are perceived as deemed invaluable because of the color of their skin when it comes to their voice. And I think that's why it's important to continue to advocate for our people. But I think that is my experience with white privilege. It's just acknowledging that I have it, and I guess what I will do about it.
Before starting at RC, I didn't really know what white privilege was, and I didn't really understand how I possessed it and how I may be influencing others with my privilege, or how white privilege influences me in my life and my experiences, my worldviews. I didn't really understand how great of a contributing factor it was to my life and society. I held quite a lot of ignorance, and I believe that I've had a lot of time since learning more about white privilege to reflect and grow and understand and learn about the implications of it and how it affects others, how I have still a lot to learn. I think it's really important to open up the environment and provide resources for people to learn about white privilege, because it should be common knowledge of how it plays into society and how it has constructed so many things within society and continues to affect people today. So, this is the end of our vlog. But before we go, we're going to do a little debrief and talk about some of the research we've done for this project and how it kind of ties into our interviews and our poll results and some of the things we've learned.
So I think the first thing that I could say is that when we first did our on the streets interview downtown with that, the first people that we pulled over, 2 white women, we asked them if they wanted to be on the video, and what did they say? They're like,
they said no. They were clearly uncomfortable with the subject, and we don't blame them. It's quite a tough subject to discuss, but it kind of goes to show.
Yeah, it goes to show that like from this article I read, racial attitudes in response to thoughts of white privilege, thus encouraging whites to think about their privilege may evoke identity threat, or doing so places the in-groups deserving this in question. So we might have just kind of maybe threatened them a bit with their identity because we were asking them about white privilege. It kind of, like you were saying, like it could have felt like, ooh, like I don't want to answer that.
And a part of like reconciliation and coming to solve societal issues that stem from places of privilege and the presence or lack of it is acknowledgement. And I feel like maybe we have presented some people through this project with the chance to acknowledge it, and I feel like maybe some people are still in denial of their privilege, which is something that is there. It's something that happens in society. People are ignorant, and people are in denial, and they don't feel like this is something that exists or something that needs discussion and needs a narrative. There's an article that Mason found titled "Disrupting White Privilege: Diving Beneath Shame and Guilt," and it discussed that consciousness and narratives are important. And I find that we have found that through this project, we've created a narrative. We've created a place for discussion and learning and breaking down and unpacking white privilege and different kinds of privilege throughout the other projects. But it talks about how to disrupt white privilege, a narrative, there has to be a consciousness about it and within it, and there also has to be narratives constructed for this conversation and for this acknowledgement.
I also feel like too, so like the now what are we gonna do now that we're creating this narrative, and like we know that there's people that still are in denial, I guess. And an article I read written by Kim A. Case called "Raising White Privilege Awareness and Reducing Racial Prejudice, Assessing Diversity Course Effectiveness." So like having to include like more diversity in classes just to like explain and like create more awareness on white privilege. So like just having those classes to talk about these tough topics so that we know that they're there. Like I know we get to talk about these tough topics, but what's to say for these other places that have all these other students? So I feel like it's important to create more of a diverse and maybe like you say decolonized classroom, because we have, I guess we'd say like a decolonized classroom, because I don't think any like typical classroom would talk about such heavy topics. Yeah.
We'll just really open up the floor for that, again with the narrative. Something we also found is that a lot of the people that are included within this project, the people we interviewed and ourselves, we all are quite like-minded on the subject. There is a lack of a perspective, but something that I found really interesting when we were interviewing people is that some of the articles that I read, I was able to identify common themes displayed across interviews. Olivia discussed intersectionality, and that was something that I had read about within a journal called Rethinking Intersectionality by Jennifer C. Nash, where it discusses what it is and how it's a primary analytic tool that feminist and anti-racist scholars deploy for theorizing identity and oppression. And she kind of talked about how important that is within white privilege and within narratives and within discussion and within bringing awareness and consciousness to the issue that it is. Some people also talked about racial identities and how they are presented in the media, specifically social media, and how they're constructed. We asked people how they felt their representation was presented and how it affected other people. So in an article I read by Nolan Brinkman from Minnesota State University, titled Racial Identities on Social Media, Projecting Racial Identities on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also on a piece titled Gender, Race, and Media Representation by Dwight E. Brooks and Lisa P. Hébert. They discussed how there is intentional and non-intentional constructions of racial identities within social media and on these platforms. And it kind of ties into the construction of persona and a front that is put up. So when we were thinking about the construction of racial identities and how they're displayed in social media, it tied back to Erving Goffman's Social Life is Drama, where it is discussed that individuals create personas or fronts that are displayed to observers, and how that interpretation varies.
I noticed this throughout the creation of this blog, that when we did do like film those interviews with people, like they could have been putting up this front in front of us, like, because we're asking them these questions, and like they want to make sure that they're saying the right thing because they're in that environment with us.
Overall, I think we've definitely learned quite a bit. It was an interesting experience and very dynamic in what we've learned and what we've come out of this project with. I definitely see a lot more perspectives, and it was really enlightening to hear what the voices behind each of the interviews and behind each of the polls and questions and answers, what they had to say. And I think that I'm stepping away from this project knowing a lot more than I did previously about white privilege and how it's seen in the eyes of many different people.
To wrap up, I guess if you enjoyed our vlog, hit that like button
And subscribe. And we'd also like to say thank you very much to the people that we interviewed. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we get a good grade. Big thank you to Mason, who couldn't be here for our wrap up. She was a huge part of our project, and we definitely had a lot of fun with her. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on the next vlog.